Hello, welcome to the October 25th, 2024 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo, and I'm the host of the live stream today. If you've not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can submit questions just by asking in the live chat field or by simply sending questions into via email to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if we can if we could specify which level of Cubase that you're running. So if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro. Also, which operating systems, if you're running Mac or Windows, and which version. So if it's 11, 12, or 13, that information is helpful. If you don't see an immediate response to your question, sometimes that may be 20 to 30 minutes behind the live questions. You could, if we could avoid asking the same questions repeatedly, that would be appreciated. Just kind of slows down the whole process. We will go through all the questions chronologically. And we should have an index of all the topics covered in today's live stream pinned to the top of the comments field. So you can look for that with timestamps so you can quickly navigate to particular files. We should, and if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, we covered over 34,000 topics. You could go to Cubase Index, and we have Jan from Stockholm who's created the wonderful website to do that. And we should give thanks to two of the attendees who serve as moderators, to Agent K and Jazz Dude. They're not Steinberg employees. They just do it to make it a better community experience. And we'll give a extra special thanks to Jazz Dude for his work with the unofficial Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful resource of information and tutorials relevant to the particular for the Cubase community. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I'm in my normal location of Alexandria, Virginia. We did our last live stream from the Yamaha Audio Lab in Nashville. Sorry for internet connection speeds. We're having to share internet amongst many other people, so hopefully everything will be more normal today with that. We'll also, so I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, and I primarily focus on Steinberg products. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you live. It's always fascinating to see. All right, so we see from Video Prives, it says, "Hi, thanks for your valuable live streams. My problem," and then just the word "I." So hopefully that was submitted a couple hours ago. Maybe we'll get back and get the full question. Zephaniah asks, "Hey Greg, whenever I right-click the mouse in an empty space, the cursor jumps to that position. How can I stop it from moving using Cubase Pro and 13 PC?" So generally, whenever you click with the right mouse button, it's always going to be the tools that come up with the right mouse button. So I'm not sure if perhaps you reprogrammed, if you have a programmable mouse, but right-clicking anywhere will access the tools. There is a preference, so if we come over here to your preferences, I believe it's going to be found under Transport, that there is a Locate when click in empty space. So if that is enabled, when I click with my left mouse button, we can just move directly to any empty space as we click with the left mouse button. So maybe if you want to see, but not with the right mouse button for me, but try to go to your preferences or settings, and then you'll go to your transport, and then you'll see Locate when clicked in empty space. Maybe if you turn that off, that would get rid of the problem for you. But again, it's only from my left mouse button. All right, so we see Fly V and Vince checking in from Winnipeg. He's happy he's got his Lander sessions working yesterday. All right, Dwight Cunningham checking in from the Bahamas. Says his question is, Greg, my question is, are the loops and music provided in Cubase commercial free to use on any project? They are. So all the content that comes with the loops and all of the sounds that you have with your instruments, they're all license free, so you could use them within your song without any worry of copyright flags or infringement notices. All right, we have Roland Stuff checking in from Asaughee, Sussex, in the south coast of England. It says, yep, it's actually been raining here. So, all right, Tim K is saying, hey to everyone, he missed the last session live. He's grateful to be joining once again from Zeist in the Netherlands. And Buddy, his cat, is waving a paw. Hello to my cat, Steven, and Stella, Mark Rabin's dog. And he's ready to learn. All right, so we see Roland Stuff just says, hi Greg, when I record tracks on my Yamaha SX900 and import them into Cubase, the alignment to Cubase bars is random. Can I shift the bars to line up with the first beat of the imported music? So Roland Stuff, let me know if you are recording audio or MIDI information. But, if you wanted to move, let's say I wanted bar 4 to be right at the start of this event. We do have a time warp tool. So we want to select a warp tool and we're going to put it into warp grid. And now what we could do is just go underneath the measure line here, and then we can move the measure to start wherever we want. But, and that will work for MIDI or audio data. So again, select the warp tool. There's 3 different modes. We want to say the warp grid, and now we can just move measure 4 to exactly wherever we want it to be. And that will just make tempo changes as needed. So let me know if that works for you. And great to see Jazz Dude on as always. Appreciate you. All right, we have Barry checking in from Albuquerque, New Mexico. Welcome to the live stream. All right, we have music for World Peace Records. Sending greetings from Pine Grove. Uno Memento from Finland. All right, so we see music for World Peace Records. Just ask, how do I solo one drum lane in the drum map editor? Okay, so if we have let's say we come over here, we have a drum part. All right, and you may need to activate like a MIDI drum map for this to happen. So I'm going to double click here. Let's go ahead and I'll just put this into a quick loop. So solo this. All right, so as soon as I come over, say I want to solo this kick, if we activate this where it says number 1, then we can just solo the particular sound. I'll just turn off the click. So we can say, okay, I want to come over here to my... So this way you can... So once you have kind of the drums and it's being sent to a drum map, then you could solo the drums, or if you just want to solo one particular instrument, at this point you can just come right over here, select the instrument, and that will solo once you turn on the solo instrument, which looks like a 1 with a circle around it. So you can solo one instrument. All right, so we see Gary Strauss. Hi, Greg. Is there a way in Cubase 13 to renumber tracks? I have some files where the tracks are numbered 1, 2, 22, 30, 15, and so on. So let's go ahead and I'm not sure if there's a way to renumber it or it just kind of goes by the order as it was originally created. So let's go ahead and add a couple tracks here. All right, so we'll add tracks. And let me move track 4 up. Okay, so as I do this, I'm not sure if it's these track numbers. So as I move track 2 down to the bottom, it's still 1, 2, 3, 4. But we see that the names here are changing, but the track numbers aren't. So let me know, Gary, if it's like the track numbers. And let's say if we come over here, so we see channels 1, 2, 3, 4, and if I move 4 to the top, we can see that that is still channel 4, but the name of the track is set to audio 4, but the track numbers here will represent the order of the tracks. All right, so we see Music for World Peace Records. Taylor asks, in Cubase 12, is there a way to display global track selections in the MIDI drum editor like you can in the key editor? I don't think so, but I'll just check to make sure there wasn't any changes. I'm pretty sure you can't. It's really kind of designed more for the drum editor. It could obviously be applicable for, or it's designed primarily for the key editor. So for here, we could just say, we go to my key editor and we take it full, that, you know, here we could go to our global tracks and we can see our transpose, our tempo, chord tracks, etc. I'll indicate it there. But when we go to the drum editor, I think it's not going to be visible. Let me activate this project. So yeah, so in 13 here we can see the global tracks right here within the drum editor, but it has to be full screen. So let me know if it's different in 12 versus 13, but it looks like you could do it in 13 as well. I thought it was limited to the key editor, but maybe 13 added the drum editor at some point. All right, Flyview's wishing everyone a happy Friday from Winnipeg. All right, Music for World Peace Records asks, what is unmixed dynamics in spectral layers? Let's take a look at it. Don't remember that one. Yes, I don't see the dynamics, unmixed dynamics as an option. So we have unmixed chorus, components, crowd noise, drums, levels, mid-side, multi-channel content, multiple voices, noisy speech, song, transcription. So let me know where you see the unmixed dynamics. All right, wonderful to see Robbie Bowling from Dallas, Texas. All right, also from Taylor, Music for World Peace Records, asks, my voucher for HSO is expired. How do I transfer the license from eLicenser to Cubase 12 licensing? I haven't seen many of them expire, but if you see expire, I would reach out to the customer support and they may be able to reissue another voucher for you. But yeah, make sure you do that soon, because next year the particular e-licenser will be shutting down at some point in 2025. And if you know, so if you want to go to the support page, I don't have the ability of, you know, like accessing accounts and stuff like that. All right, Music for World Peace Records asks, where can I download impulse responses? So there's a number of sites that you could download impulses from. Probably Jazz Dude is going to be on top of it. Let me just scroll down and see if I see he's already given a link, some waves and Bricasti impulse responses that you could use. But, you know, if you just search for like IR, you know, reverb IRs as well. So, All right, we see Music for Peace Records asks, will a high latency plugin create latency when used as an insert in the control room? So as long as it's going to be active within the project, it could still have like latency. It will still impose latency. So if we come over here, you may not be able to see the particular latency, but we'll give it a shot here. Let's get to the control room, to insert, and we'll just put on, let's say, vocal chain a couple times because that has a good amount of, does a lot of look ahead stuff, so there's a lot of latency. So let me just open that up several times here. We'll do like 5 times, and then we could judge when we hit the transport to when it plays. Okay, so now we come over here and I hit play. You can see now when I hit stop. So those will impose latency even if they are in the control room. All right, and we have Stefan checking in from Sweden. Thanks for joining us. We have Matt Elston saying hi to the awesome Cubase community. Flyview says he's praying our live stream holds it down today. Yeah. I think we're kind of back to my normal location where I don't have to share internet with anyone other than my wife. All right, James Bastani sending greetings from Beverly Hills. Thanks for joining us. And we have Martin joining from Germany. John Howland is sending greetings to the Cubase family watching from Nixa, Missouri. Thanks for being online today. Mantigata just says, I don't speak your language, I speak Portuguese. So you can, I think that once we're done with the live stream, you could have it closed captioned in Portuguese. You could also use Google Translate to ask a question, and we could try to go through it. I'm sorry that I don't speak Portuguese. I apologize for that. All right, so we see it just says, hi, Adam from the UK, Artist 13 user here. Is there a master level meter, or is that only in Pro? So I think it's going to be in inside of Cubase. So inside of Cubase Artist, I don't think it's limited to Pro, but if you go to your meter section here, so make sure, one, that you have this right zone activated. And then, like, as you would play, you can see the master meter here. Now there's 2 different, so you could see the meter here. I think that you have the loudness meter. This may be in Pro only, but I'm pretty sure that Artist has the master meter right here. So once you kind of click at the tabs across the top, you could see meter, and then you could pick which type of meter scale that you want to use. But I'm pretty sure that Artist has that. All right, we see Tim Weinheimer on from Mission Viejo. Thanks for joining us. All right, my chat field jumped on me. Let me get it back. All right. All right, so DJ Stat says, all right, Greg, is there a way to delete the recent files list from SpectraLayers Pro 11? All right, so let me see if we open it up. Okay, so we see the recent files here. Let's see if there's a preference. right, let me just see if there's... Let's see if I reset. I was just taking a quick look through preferences, make sure I'm not missing anything. So I don't know what I did off the top of my head. Yeah, I don't see a way of doing it in the spectral layers. I could do some more research on it and see if I get an answer for you on that. All right, Recycle App is checking in from Finland. It says he's glad to be on time for one, so he needs to leave in a moment, and he'll be back and forth. Great to see Dallas LaRue checking in from Las Vegas. And we see Troy Bourne checking in from Providence, Rhode Island. Thanks for joining us. Usually have Lawrence Koch on from Rhode Island. All right, wonderful to see Gareth from Spain joining us. Songwriter, singer, and guitarist from the band Hot Mess, a Club Cubase project. All right, so Gareth asks, what interface do you use, Sir Greg? For my studio, I have, let me clear my throat real quick. I have an AXR4U, so it's the 32-bit 384K converter. It has like the Rupert Neve Silk preamps on it. So I use that for my personal studio. For my office tasks, I have a UR24C that I use for my work computer, and for the live stream, that UR24C and my microphone go into a Yamaha AG08, which is kind of like a streaming mixer. All right, so we see Benny stopping by just to say hello. He's out on a gig. We have a wonderful performance. And you had to hit the like button, so make sure you do that. We see the artist known as Love. Hope everyone's wishing everyone is safe and well. And just thanking me and wants everyone to hit the like button. All right, so we have Larry B checking in from Brampton, Ontario, Canada. Okay, so Gareth Kitch is asking, can the Steinberg UR-RT4 12-volt power supply be replaced by any generic power supply with the same polarity? I think that you would be okay, but I'm not a total electronics expert. But I think that you would be okay with that. All right, so we see Ted Carpenter says, hi Greg, can you tell me why when using VST Connect Pro, I'm only able to record musicians in mono? I've been using Stereo Flip to convert the audio to stereo. I'm using version 13, Ted from DC. So, most people have it working in stereo and want it to be in mono, but it could really depend upon the actual project. And, so let's say if I wanted to come here to my project, I think I have a VST Connect. So, but if we add, so if we were starting a project here, so I could come over, and it's really just whatever track is added. So let's say we do a new project, so one that's kind of pre-configured, and we will come over here and choose, okay, let's go to our VST Cloud. We'll go to create VST Connect. We're going to use that as the input. I will come over here. Usually when you use kind of the default settings, it shows up as stereo, and you could now come over here and see the VST Connect as an input source in stereo. So, but make sure that like when you're connecting, I don't have another computer turned on, but when you're connecting that, if you're using kind of the VST Connect, where you create a VST Connect directly from here, by default that will show up in stereo, but you could also add, if we add a mono track, we could say, okay, I just want to do a VST Connect in mono. So we could just come right over here. So, we could see it usually kind of defaulting to stereo. So, but, see if you have like a stereo input that's defined on the person that you're recording. But you can, I know in previous versions that you could see like the VST Connect, left and right channels independently there. All right, so Gareth is saying he has an opportunity to buy URRT4, but it doesn't have the power supply. So I could, if you let me know, Gareth, or you could look up on the Yamaha manual. Yamaha's like really good. I'm sure that you could call the Yamaha distributor. I could give you probably the part number for the particular, if you go into the documentation, the manual for the URRT4, and I realize it's going to be a different power supply in the US versus Europe, but it will actually give you the European power supply. And if you don't know that, you could, if you were worried about it, you could probably just order it from the Yamaha parts department from Yamaha in Europe. I'm not sure if there's a separate Yamaha Spanish distributor or if it's just kind of handled by the Yamaha Europe group. All right, wonderful to see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas. We have Stefan Glass saying hi from Germany. All right, so Tim Weinheimer asks, Greg, I want to know how to maybe import a Spectral Layers or Wavelab project into a Cubase project. I use PC. I'm using Cubase Pro 13, Wavelab Pro 12, and Spectral Layers Pro 11. So I don't think that their projects, a project in Cubase is going to be very different than a Wavelab project is going to, a Wavelab project, we could think of it like if you were mastering a CD as being the individual files, maybe at high resolution, low resolution, a montage, a batch processor, that's all saved together. So that would be called a project in Wavelab, like all the files that you would need for a particular mastering session for album. But those things aren't quite analogous and, don't translate directly over into Cubase, and a Cubase project with MIDI information isn't going to be imported into Wavelab because, there's, no MIDI information in Wavelab, no kind of mixing, and, like the mix console, is going to be a very different approach where it's more object oriented. So in Spectral Layers, this is going to be, for, similar to Wavelab conceptually, where, you could have multiple files kind of stored together as a project, but there's no like project, the term project is used as kind of like a collection of all the media and parts and elements that, is going to be used for one, like that you'd want to save under one particular file. But those files between the programs are kind of very different, so they're not quite interchangeable. All right, we see Gareth is very happy to see Michael Teams on, as is everyone, because everyone will start getting virtual ice cream. We have Vernam Nachname just sending greetings from Hungary. Thanks for joining us today. Welcome to the live stream. And we have Michael Graybill just sending hello from Dallas, wishing everyone well. All right, Mark Rabin is out running errands, just popped in to say hi. Jazz is reminding everyone that we had a Cubase and Nuendo update for 13.05 was released yesterday. All right, so we see Michael Graybill just says, is looking for a way to affect soft quantize to the ends of the MIDI notes. Is there a way? So I haven't found one. I was kind of playing around with it. And I just got back kind of late last night from Nashville. It was kind of busy couple days in Nashville. So the question from Tuesday's live stream was taking MIDI notes here that kind of, and doing a soft quantize, kind of like what we do here. So let's say when we do a soft quantize, let's say if I put this to quarter notes and we have these notes selected and we open up our quantize panel and say, okay, we're going to do quarter notes and we're going to set our percentage to 80%, that we can move each of these notes 80% closer to the beat without actually getting on the beats. As we do this, we can see that as we zoom in, kind of that distance will be proportional but not actually get to the beat. But when we do this with the note ends, we can quantize, and we could have kind of the soft quantized enabled here, but it seems like that's only for, so we can quantize the ends. We can see that it's going to be kind of the absolute value. So I don't think that there's a way to do that. If we quantize the lengths there, or if we quantize the ends, it's not going to be set to like an iterative quantized value. So, but I will pass that along to the team in Germany to see if that's possible. All right, so we have Gerald Ely stopping in, say hi and hit the likes, and he'll be back later. All right, so we see, just question, am I the only one who sometimes sees, sometimes not, Greg's mouse? So I did make it like the cursor bigger, so it'd be easier to follow and track, but let me know if sometimes depending on the YouTube speed, YouTube will change the resolution depending on your internet speed. So if you go to the settings cogwheel, you might be able to adjust to a higher resolution than and maybe the mouse would be more visible in that case. All right, so we see from Kevin Crayford, hi Greg, I use a lot of ESTs in my projects and find my screen gets cluttered up. Is there any way I can have Cubase open the VST windows only when a track is selected? All right, so let's say if we have, I'll jump to a different project here. So when a track is selected, you may not want the VST windows, but there is a key command. So let me go to my MIDI remote here. I'll select my nano control. Let's switch to different page here. So as I do this, I want this particular key to do edit VST instrument. So we'll just come over here to the mapping. Okay, and you'll find that under the edit category. And I'm gonna have that key automatically. So now anytime that I go to a track, I can just hit that same key to open up the particular VST instrument that's on that track. So you don't have to necessarily leave them open or closed, but but as you select a track, I think that having the VST instrument automatically open would be kind of an annoyance for a lot of things. Like, okay, I just want to select this track to solo it. When I select a track, maybe I don't want the VST instrument to open, but you could just have one key command and just say, okay, when we're on a particular track with a VST instrument, that you could just click on that key command to open and close it. And that way you don't have to have, 20 different VST instrument windows open, and you could manage it pretty easily. And it's a user definable keyboard shortcut as well. All right, so we see Mark Rabin says he's at a car place swapping tires for his daughter-in-law. That's a good father-in-law thing to do. So hope everything goes well. I'm sure it'll cost more than you expect. All right, so Stefan Glass says Cubase 14 March 2025. So we'll let you know when it comes out. You'll probably know when it's released. All right, so we see from Veromed, it says, hi Greg, last week I queried about deleting unused files in the edit folder. You mentioned that you'll get back on that. I was wondering if you had any update on the same. So I didn't get a chance to do it. I got back late last night, just was traveling this week. But I'll make a note to do it for Tuesday's live stream. I apologize for that. Gareth says it's always wonderful to see Robbie Bowling on the live stream from Dallas, Texas. All right, so we see from Roland Stuff that the warp grid for his SX900 projects is exactly what he was looking for, so it's great. All right, so Dot Solenoid asks, hi, I'm using I guess it's Osome keyboard as an MPE input in Cubase 13. After adding the note expression input device, it works fine. However, how do I save the setting? Currently, Cubase forgets it. So every time I have a Rolly, I don't have it out in my closet. But when we come over here and we add a note expression input device, usually when I've done this, it's always kind of saved the particular settings. And this would be kind of project independent. But let me know if for some reason, if you turn it on and then, if Cubase is turned on maybe before the controller, maybe it's not catching the initial connection there. If the controller is turned on afterwards, but I know that when I have my Rolly keyboard, I never had to reset it. It just kind of stayed where it was. So, but make sure that you have, as soon as you open up your Cubase, if you have MIDI communication and that the unit is perhaps powered on before Cubase starts, but you should be able to just have it recalled right there. All right, so we see Flyv, who just says, what's being in the control room mean? So maybe it's referring back to our previous question. So in the control room, we could have effects that are just in the actual control room area here. So some different types of effects that you may want to have in the control room. Let's say you are having a room correction software that would adjust the EQ for deficiencies in your monitoring environment with your speakers. You may want to have that just on the playback, but you may not want those changes that are kind of imposed, that are kind of brought by that particular plugin on your audio mix down. So that's why we could have plugins that are in the control room that are just for the monitoring path, that don't get applied when we go to the mix console and do an export audio mix down. So if I put effects in my master fader and I do an export audio mix down, those files, those plugins are automatically embedded there. If we put plugins here in the control room, we hear it through the speakers, but they're not actually going to be included within the audio path when we export the audio file. All right, so we have a question. Cubase activates stereo balance by default. Isn't stereo information lost using this setting? Isn't it better to use the combined pan setting? VSTIs have so much stereo information. So it could really depend. People would have a preference either way, but I think that we could change the preferences. So let's come over here. Let's see if it's under VST. So the default stereo panner, you could just switch to the stereo combined panner here. So you can just go to your preferences to VST. So if you want the stereo combined panner versus the balance panner, you could just set a preference, and then as you add tracks, they will automatically be with the stereo panner that you want. All right, so Bo from Copenhagen says hi. I'm not sure if it's Copenhagen or Copenhagen. All right, so we see from Video Priv, hi, my computer keyboard makes MIDI sounds in Cubase 10, but in Cubase 13, it's okay. What to do? So make sure there is a function where, if we have, let's say I come over here to like a Rhodes patch, that if I hit, there's a virtual keyboard that you can hit Alt or Option plus the letter K. And now your computer keyboard, and sometimes this may get hidden, but it's still active. And this way, when you hit these particular keys, so maybe in your Cubase 10, this is set up so your computer keyboard is acting as a controller. So try hitting Alt or Option K to turn it on and off, and see if that makes a difference for you. Now, when I play keys, they function as normal keys for functions inside of Cubase. All right, so we see what all does the profile manager save? Does it include my custom macros as well? Where can I find my custom macros? So the macros are going to be actually stored within your key commands file. So that would automatically be included with the profile. So the profile, and I may miss some things, but it's going to be like your key commands, your preferences, your I/O settings, your user presets, your global workspaces. So a number, your user presets, that's all going to be stored in a profile, so that you could take all of those kind of user created, presets and functions and preferences from one computer to another computer. And to do that, you'd go to your edit menu, to your profile manager. And here we could actually export the profile from one computer and choose to import it into another computer. see Gareth's answer to Flyview's question of what's being in the control room mean. It says it means you're sitting next to Bob Clearmountain. So. Okay, sorry, my chat field just jumped. All right, let me just find my spot where I was. Okay. All right, so we see from Verome, says feature request, can we please have a live MIDI note in and chord display in Cubase? It'd be a really nice feature to have. So if you want to see what notes are being played, so let's say if I have here, if I go to my MIDI inserts, there is like for individual notes, you go to your MIDI monitor. So you could do that. So it may not show the chords, but you can see kind of the live MIDI notes. And if we want to go, and I know you probably asked about this earlier, I think maybe on Tuesday, about this coming over, and let me just so let's say if we solo this part here, let's say while I'm recording, that we could see, I know it's smaller than some people want it to be, but as we come over and like as we're recording, so I'll just come here, that we could see the chords being displayed right here. So you can see it like, while you're recording, and I think you wanted that to be bigger, but you could also see the individual notes with the MIDI monitor plugin. All right, so you see Captenergy Music. Says, Greg, are you aware that Google is going to be implementing AI voiceovers for different languages? I saw something about it briefly. I've seen some. I know I was talking with John Barron on the Dorco team, who does the Dorco live streams, the Discover Dorco sessions. And I know that they were experimenting because there's someone on their team that's German speaking, and is a German native speaker, and they actually took videos that he had done in real time and had it translated. I think the guy was a little wigged out hearing his voice in English automatically and switching to different languages. So I think it'll be coming pretty quickly. So hopefully if you want to listen to and have it translated in real time to Portuguese and other languages, that you'd be able to do that from a live stream like this. Okay, so we see Michael Teams is granting 1 gallon of HEB coconut fudge ice cream to each of you. And that's just for the Texas attendees. So we see Texas is succeeding from other groups here. They have their own power grid, so we have to watch out. All right, so DK Guitars ask, hi from California, editing question. Is there a way to cut and paste information in a selected column within the project window? So let's say I have, like I could use like the range selection tool. So let's say we have a number of different events here. And if we want to, I'm going to hold down my Command or Control key plus the Shift key and with the range tool. So again, I'm just going to select the range tool, and this will globally select, we could do this for a particular event, select a range or events, but if we want this to be global, what we could do now is hold down Control or Command plus the Shift key, and that will globally select the range. And now if I just want to move that range, let's say to here, we could do that. Or if we want to copy that particular range, we could just hold down the Alt or Option key and copy like so. So you could try maybe using the range tool with the Alt or Option key, and let me know if that works for you. But that will do like all of your tempo events, all your automation, all of the events as well, utilizing the range tool. All right, so Philippe asked, are you going to show a proper Dolby Atmos mixed, if possible, sir, because the one from Nuendo wasn't clear enough? So if we're starting, and I'll just do like a simple project so it's easier to follow, and with this you may have to listen to it with headphones on, but we'll come over, let me just see if it's in my recent files. All right, we'll just do a single track so you could hear it easily. It's always a hard thing to show in a live stream. But first we want to make sure that your studio setup is going to be that you have the buffer size set to 512 samples, and that you want this sample rate, and we do this in the project setup, you want the sample rate to be at 48K. So let's say, and so once we have those two conditions set up, we'll come over here and we will go to ADM authoring, and there's a setup. So we'll say, okay, let's, we're going to create a main mix configuration 7.4, just kind of check these different items here. And we'll create our bed, our 712 bed. We'll hit OK. And now we'll see the renderer plugin pop up. And what we can do now is say, okay, what are we monitoring on? Do we actually have 714 speakers? And do we have 12 speakers in our setup? Do we have a 5.1? Or are we going to mix with headphones on? Are we going to mix binaurally? So I'm going to say binaural because this way, if you have headphones on, you'll be able to hear this. And we'll close this particular channel. So this has created our bed channel, all the right routing. So now when I go to a particular track here, we could double click on the panner. We can see our height channel here by clicking on this little, and at this point, if we wanted to automate, or if we wanted to just kind of play around, so now if I wanted to go kind of behind you, so if you're listening to it with headphones on, if I want to change the height, so now if we wanted to automate these changes as we start the next round here, kind of do this type of panning for all of our tracks. So now, once we have kind of all of our tracks that have been automated, we can choose to come right here and we'll say, okay, let's get to the renderer plugin. And now at this point, we could just choose to export, or I'm sorry, we'll just go to our project. So we'll go to our ADM authoring here, and then once everything is kind of panned as we like, we could export the ADM file. And that's what's going to be used to deliver the Dolby Atmos mix. All right, so we see from Etienne Lane, hi Greg, when automating EQ plugin parameters, its effect on a specific track is slightly delayed, so I need to manually move the envelope ahead of time, stock and third-party plugins, any solution. So, it could be other plugins that are causing kind of the track delay. So let's say if I wanted to come over here, let's just grab a quick. Okay, so we'll take this guitar part here. So if you have a lot of plugins that are kind of very latent on it, when I come over here and adjust the EQ, it's very responsive. But let's say if I have multiple plugins active that are heavy latency, like plugins that again need to look ahead. So now when I'm adjusting the EQ, it may not be as responsive. So now that I make adjustments, but it still seems kind of pretty responsive as I would automate. So let's come over here, adjust our EQs. Seems pretty responsive. So if you're running like a very kind of heavy latency plugin scenario, then you may run into that. But it seems even with, a good amount of latency on a particular chain, that everything is kind of working as expected for me. But, depending on how many plugins that you have, and what you could do quickly is you could maybe activate the constrained delay compensation and see, because that could bypass or disable plugins that have a lot of latency on it. All right, we see Dwight Cunningham just says, thanks very much. Garrett says, thanks for answering the question, Greg. All right, so Robert Daisy Webb says, hi, Greg. The holidays just started here in Bavaria, Germany. Yeah, we have Halloween coming up here next week in the United States on Thursday. Memento just says, don't forget to hit the like button. David M is on. He says it's Friday and it's nice to be on. He's saying hi to everyone. All right, we have Rude Pass just saying hey to everyone on a Friday evening. All right, so we see from Dwight Cunningham, hi Greg, is it possible, can you explain ADR using Cubase 13? So a lot of times when we're doing, ADR on a particular session, Nuendo has a lot of great tools that people will use. If we were to do some ADR, we could kind of almost mimic some of the particular workflows where you could say, okay, we'll create an empty project. We'll import, let's say, a video file. Okay, so let's say as we're playing here and we're going to have, let's say, we play the video. So let's say I was doing narration here. So let's say I was doing like a voiceover, or we needed to. So once we see kind of the manual, what you could do is say, okay, this is the scene that I need to do. Like as we're listening, like we could drop markers. So let's add a quick marker track. So we'll say, okay, so like as we're playing, we could just come over here and say, okay, I want to drop a marker between there and there. And now what we could do is we could, with the range tool, double click between the markers, and let's say we needed to replace dialogue where we saw the actor's lips moving, but let's say they're supposed to be in like a 19th century environment, and all of a sudden a plane flies over their head and you have to re-record the audio, which is pretty typical. So we come over here and let's add an audio track. We'll make it just a mono track here. So what we could do is have that person, we could set up kind of the markers, and if we wanted to now just hit the letter P, we could at this point just say, okay, we want to punch in and punch out manually. So we could just say, okay, we'll do this.
Is Hamburg, an independent historic hub.
All right, so we could now just come over here and have the actor just kind of redo the different dialogue. And once we do this, each one of these recordings, they could do multiple takes. And if we needed to say, okay, they really got a great emphasis starting on take 1, but the middle part of take 2 was really good, and take 4, the ending was really good, that we can now make kind of a composite. If you need to slip, like if they came in just a little early or a little bit late, we can come over here and you could select one word if you wanted to and hold down the Alt or Option plus the Command or Control key, and then you could slip the audio to. And while you do this, if you're slipping audio, we have a mode here. If you're doing it in conjunction with video, that we could say under transport, that will say video follows edit mode, so that as I move an audio component, that we could see the video kind of updating frame by frame as we move different elements. So Nuendo has like, a very specific ADR function, and I could show that if you want to see that, but you can kind of mimic a lot of the functionality here in Cubase if that's a tool that you're using. All right, so we see Roland stuff. Says, hi Greg, I'm just starting to use Dorico 5 Elements. It is linked directly to Cubase 13 Pro for scoring. finished song with several MIDI tracks. How can the two work together, please? So if we have, so currently they still work as two different programs. We've had a lot of feature requests to, of deeper integration. So we'll see what comes in the future. But let's say if I have a particular event here and I look at my oboe part. So let me activate this project. One of the cool things you can do is if we look at my oboe part here, and we have Dorico open. Okay, so we'll just come here, we'll create a new part and say, okay, I want this to be we'll say solo. Okay, so we'll add a single player. So let's say, okay, we want this to be bassoon. Okay, so we'll add our part. So we thought it'd be cool if we could actually just kind of, I think if we drag and drop, that we can come here. Okay, it's for oboe, so we'll hit OK. So you could drag and drop the score directly from Cubase into Dorico. But we'll see as different evolutions occur, what happens. So it's obviously people from day one have wanted to be able to have tighter integration. I know the development teams on both programs are aware of that. Okay, see, Michael Teens is giving David M 1 gallon of cherry mash ice cream. All right, so Fly V just says, just wondering, I'm into hip hop and don't need much live apps like Spectralayers. What do you guys think? I could use it or not? So there's a lot of great stuff that you could do, if you're doing Spectralayers. So let's say if we go to like a new project and let's say we borrow someone's loop that's really obvious. We could do a lot of kind of deconstruction of different elements. So, if you wanted to even, be able to unmix vocals, that's always good. So if you wanted to come over, we'll just find a couple. So if we have this, we'll put it into. But now if we wanted to go into Spectralayers and say, we'll just do this. We could just say, okay, if you're doing hip hop stuff, one is, to be able to do different emphasis on particular frequencies. So let's say we come and we go into Spectralayers, but also like on a drum loop. Let's say maybe it's not, could be a copyright strike or sampling royalty, that here you could even just say, okay, let's unmix the drums. on this particular track. If you wanted to, you thought it was really cool, but you want the kick drum to be softer. Or let's say now I want to take the kick drum out into the project. So now, if I wanted to come here, let's just say we will go to my audio menu, and I'm going to bounce the selection quickly. So if I wanted to now tune the kick drum, I could say, okay, you know, when I select the particular file here, we could just say, or I could double click on this. Let's get to our hit points. And let me load up a instrument track. So if I wanted to replace the kick drum, I could Alright, so I've loaded this sound up, so now I want to replace the kick drum with, let's say, kick drum there. So I'm going to double click and we'll just say create MIDI notes. I'll make it C1 on the first selected track. So stuff like that where you could easily replace the kicks and different samples is really good use in hip-hop workflows. So spectral layers would be cool for that. All right, so we have Fenglu's on saying hello to everyone. All right, so we see video prive. Yeah, so we answered your question a little while ago, so I know it may have. All right, so we have Pablo on from Galicia, España. Got the full Hot Mess group on tonight. All right, Neo Dungle Experience asks, hi Greg, nice to hear from you again. Can you please explain just a little bit about how the control room works on Cubase? Thanks. All the way from Northeast India. So when we think of the control room is often kind of like the center section of a console. And that's really kind of the typical functionality of it. So the control room, we could think of it as a monitoring path, like a monitoring stage of the mixer. So if we are here and we look at my mix, now a lot of people that have powered mixers may adjust the volume of their monitoring source by adjusting their master fader. That's often not good because when we go to export the file, and if I have my master fader here because my speakers are kind of cranked up, we lose a lot of information. So people go, oh, why does my mix sound so soft? It's because you're using the master fader as a volume control, a monitoring volume control. So the control room, when I adjust this, I could have my monitor control, but I could also not affect the gain structure of the mix itself. So when I come over here, my gain structure is not affected, but I could now have different monitoring paths. We could set a known monitoring level. So if I want to always, for this to be my loudest, there's many engineers, like I think this is a Phil Ramone technique that, you know, he would, when they first started the session, they would agree on a monitoring level and put a piece of tape on the control room of the console. and they would all agree to never go above that particular range. You could go below all day long, but you can never go to the maximum value. So this way you could go to a particular monitoring value. Now there's also downmix presets. So we can say, okay, I want to listen to this in mono, stereo, or if you're listening to it in 714. So you could do different downmix presets. Now there's also external inputs. So let's say, someone, you have, and you could use the available inputs and outputs of your audio interface. So if we say, okay, we want to go to my half-inch analog, I have an Amazon Echo. So if someone says, make it sound like this, you could now just say, Alexa, play this song. And you could now have the audio output from your Amazon Echo automatically fit into the monitoring path. So right now we could listen to the mix, and if I wanted to listen to something that was coming from an external source, all I would have to do is come right over here, and I could listen to an external source as a reference. Now the control room also allows us to have different like headphone Q mixes. So when we are working with our Q mixes, let me clear my throat, hang on. So this way, when the bass player wants to hear more of themselves and more of the kick than the vocalist who wants to hear themselves louder, but maybe not the headphone click. So you don't have to edit out the clicks of the headphone from the vocal recording. You could set independent levels for directly there. So this will allow you to do different downmix presets, set monitoring. Also, as we discussed earlier, if we wanted to have like room correction, something like Sonar works, we could come right over here and listen to this, listen to these plugins that affect only the monitoring path that aren't going to be included in the exported audio mixdown. So again, just a complete monitoring path, and that's what the control room is going to allow you to do. It's a really essential part of the mix console and the Cubase experience. All right, so we see from Rude Pass, Greg, how do you record ARP patterns real-time triggered by one note in VSTs? So it really, clear my throat. It really depends on the capabilities of the VST itself. So if I wanted to utilize something like Groove Agent allows you to take the patterns, and we think of those as arpeggios, directly into and record that into Cubase. So I'm going to come here, and let's say on this track I have a pattern, and now on this track I could set the MIDI input to come directly from Groove Agent, so that as I hit play, just solo this, sorry. So now when I do fills, it switches from all MIDI inputs here to Groove Agent. Sorry. So now anytime that I do a fill, but now if I went to, so all of the drum patterns here have been recorded directly in. So Groove Agent is designed to do that. Now some instruments may have like an arpeggio. So let's say if I come here and we go to the instrument and I turn on the arpeggiator, that we could kind of have different arpeggiators. But these arpeggiators, this plugin doesn't have like a MIDI output to it. So what you can do is click on record and say, let's just pull up a quick preset here. So if I click on record, I can now just come over here and I could drag that pattern out onto the project window, but it's not passing real-time MIDI. Another trick that we could do is if we have MIDI plugins and we want to record those, so I go to my MIDI inserts and let me just pull up a quick Apache. So I'm going to just play a chord, and if I move this, we see this white line that becomes visible as we hover. If I move that down, I can just come over here, and as we hit record, so now that, since I put that in record from the MIDI insert, by moving that down, it will now record the output of the arpeggiator directly to the timeline. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right. See, Tim Weinheimer just says, what I mean is imported CD track into spec layers, unmixed a track. Wanted to know if I can import the unmixed track, or can I only import the track and then unmix the track in Cubase? So, I mean, you could unmix inside of spectral layers running it by itself. I think that we could do, let me just check, see if there's a direct CD import. In spectral layers, you might have to import it. Yeah, so you may have to turn it into a WAV file in spectral layers before unmixing, but you could just go to Cubase here and choose to import audio CD. And if you have a CD-ROM, you could just import the track there and do the unmixing. Just all right. So, and just reading this again, so Tim just says, what I mean is imported CD track into spec layers, unmixed a track. Wanted to know if I could import the unmixed track, or can I only import the track and then unmix the track in Cubase? I know it works. So once you have the, the unmixed tracks, you could just drag them directly back into Cubase. But let me know if I'm misunderstanding, Tim. All right, Pablo says, finally, he has a question. All right. All right, so we see Pablo just says, my question, when I import a MIDI file, can it be placed below the selected track and at the cursor? By default, it is always imported at the end of the session, and at the beginning of the project. So, sometimes the MIDI file itself will have just the capability of the position could be kind of burned into the MIDI file. So let's say we have, we'll put it, let's see if we could import it here. So I'm going to select the last track here, and let's see what happens when we go to import, and I have my song position set to bar 1. So let's go to import MIDI file, and I think I may have one. It says, do you want to create a new project? We're going to choose no. Okay, so let's say we want to take this MIDI file, and as we've done this, so I think that depending, So the MIDI file itself, and I think that this is going to be like, the same. So, the MIDI file itself, when you look at the information in the MIDI file, it's going to say start at measure 16, beat 1, clock pulse, this. So that timing information is preserved in the MIDI file. So that's why it will import directly to that time. So, but let's see if we go to our preferences, and that's just kind of a part of the MIDI file that the time information is automatically preserved. But let's see if when we import, we can say import to left locator. So let's say if I come over and I move my left locator here, if that will still do the offset. All right, so but that information is actually kind of, like then when we look at the notes here in the MIDI file, what the MIDI file is actually containing is when we go to your list editor, that this note is starting at this measure. It's, this beat, this clock pulse, it's this pitch, it's this velocity, and it's this, so all that information is just kind of embedded, and that's what's being carried over in the MIDI file because the MIDI file has its position. But it looks like, okay, and we can see that if you have this, like I had selected this particular track and that's where the MIDI file was placed. Let me see if I select this track, if it goes to the bottom. It may just add it to the bottom automatically. Yeah, so it's going to add it to the bottom of the particular track. So, but the timing is always going to be based upon the information within the MIDI file. And all right, so we see Estevan Carlos Benson says, man, I find the nano control so annoying. It has a major flaw on Windows systems. Depending on how many MIDI ports you have, I think there's something where, it doesn't work beyond MIDI port 15 or something like that. I run it on my Mac and PC and I don't have any problems. But you could reach out to Korg on that. I'm going to blow off a call from my hero, Jeff Berlin. All right. Incredible bass player. All right, so Amanda Hunt Taylor, award-winning songwriter, says I have a Cubase 13 and it's been a while since I've mixed anything. I can't figure out how to auto-tune a vocal. Do I add it via insert? If so, how is my question? Thank you, and I'm in Fort Worth, Texas. All right, so if you have vocals, one of the great things with Cubase is that if you wanted to run auto-tune, you could do it directly as an insert, but you could also, and I think the later versions, we could run as an ARA extension. But if you wanted to do tuning in Cubase, you could actually double-click on the event. That will take you into the sample editor. Click on the Vary Audio tab, and then you could just click on Edit Vary Audio. And when we look at it here, we can take it into full screen, and you could do all of your tuning right here inside of Cubase without having to utilize a third-party tool. So you have that functionality directly inside of Cubase. So if we wanted to solo this, and let me solo the track.
I started losing sight my play.
So we say, okay, let's move this pitch up.
I started losing sight my play.
And if we wanted to adjust, come over here, we could adjust the percentage that notes are in tune. So we could just come over here and be able to adjust like so.
I started losing sight my play.
And if we want to just select one note, move it down there.
I started losing sight my place. I started losing sight my play.
So you could do that, but if you wanted to utilize auto-tune, just run it as an insert effect. But again, you have amazing tuning capabilities that are just a part of Cubase with Very Audio. Welcome to the live stream. All right, so we have Lawrence Koch from Barn Door Recording in Rhode Island. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we have Alexander Bites just saying yo. Thanks for joining us. All right, my chat field just jumped. Let me find my spot. Okay, so I think I'm back to where I was. Sorry about that. All right, so we have Nicholas Turpin from Marseille, France. Thanks for joining us. David M says, well, that's the first. Last Friday, Greg fixed my problem with telepathic karmic presence. It wasn't even a Cubase problem either. Thanks, Yoda. We're just glad you got it up and working. All right, so we see Video Prive says thanks, but the Cubase piano on screen is turned off, but still the MIDI sounds at the computer keyboard. So do you have any other utilities that are turning on, like a MIDI controller or something, or some utility that's turning your MIDI keyboard to transmit MIDI sounds? It's usually not a Cubase function that would do that, but there could be utilities that allow for like performance. See what happens. And one way to check is if so once you're on a MIDI track, don't set it to all MIDI inputs, but set it directly to the MIDI input of your MIDI controller and see if that makes a difference. And you can see all of the available MIDI controllers here that are being recognized by your computer operating system. And if you see one that doesn't make sense, come over to your studio setup, and we will go to your MIDI port setup and see if these all look like normal devices and there isn't like a software tool that's turning your MIDI controller into a virtual MIDI port. And where you see in all MIDI inputs, if you see one of those, you could just uncheck in all MIDI inputs. But, generally there's nothing in Cubase other than that function that would cause your computer keyboard to play MIDI. But, there may be other tools that are still enabled that could be causing that. See, Watch Addicts 12 asks, are we live? So yes, I may be behind the live chat, maybe about 45 minutes, but I'm working my best, or maybe about 25 minutes, but working my best to catch up. All right, so we have Spa Dogs checking in for Canada. Great to see you on. All right, so we see a question from, is there a way to move the range selection without affecting the events? Okay, so let's say if I want to come over here and I have the range selection, I think that we can just see if we can. So, we can, I think, extend the range selection. So if we want to come here, so then once we have that, so if we wanted to grab the edge here, and I think that if we come in, that it's maybe under, so we could just say like range to next hit point, range to previous event. So let's say if we are, we have a range selection on a drum event here. So let's say I have this. Then we could, and we see under select, we could say, range to the next hit point. And then you could adjust the range here. But you could manually resize the range without moving the particular event just by grabbing it here. But look under, if you go to the edit menu to select, and you can say range to the next event. So you could do stuff like that as well. All right, so we have Watch Addicts 12. This is question Mark Meter here in Little Rock, Arkansas. Running Cubase 13 Pro, as is my bassist. My bassist wants to reinstall Cubase 8. He has 8 on his computer, but it won't open. He believes he has the project saved on his Mac, but they will only open in Cubase 8. Can you still install older versions? So yeah, he will need to have a USB-E licenser with a license, and it could be a later version like 11, 10.5, 10, 9.59, 8.5, or 8. That will open it up. But if he's trying to open up 8 and he doesn't have his USB-E licenser, then then it won't open. He would need to physically connect the USB-E licenser directly to his computer to open up Cubase 8. The file formats from Cubase 8 will, or Cubase 11, those file formats will automatically open in Cubase 13 as well. So, and I guess he may be going back to Cubase 8 because if you needed to run some 32-bit plugins, Cubase 8 would allow you to do that, but you will need the USB-E licenser connected to the computer. And depending upon the operating system, if you get a brand new Mac, you may not, it may kind of, it may not run 32-bit applications, because if you're going back, 15 years or so, or 12 years, some of the Mac operating systems are less forgiving. So, but he will need to have the USB-E licenser for Cubase 11 and earlier connected. All right, so Timing Guitar says he's very tempted to jump to Nuendo. So yeah, there currently is a cross-grade promotion. I think it's around, in the US, I think it's around $250 to jump from Cubase to Nuendo, and you get to keep your Cubase license as well. All right, so we see from Tireman Guitars says I installed Wavelab 8 today on my Mac. Do you know why it has some lag issues with the graphics? It all works, but there's an obvious lag, and I can't work out how to resolve it. So I think that that might be depending on which Mac OS version. It could be not written for. Obviously it's not written for Apple Silicon because that was years before Apple Silicon was ever conceived. So there may be some compatibility issues. Generally going backwards compatibility, Mac OS isn't as forgiving as Windows with that. So it might be just, a mismatch of when that program was out and the Mac operating systems were available to, to when the program was out. All right, so we see Watch Addict says, for whatever reason, he can't open the version 8.5 Cubase on his Mac. He wanted to reinstall it. So, sometimes, as we just mentioned, it's harder to go back on, with older software on more contemporary Macs. So maybe if you tell us, like, which exact Mac he's running versus, but, Windows is a lot better for that regard. We see from Watch Addicts 12, he has complete tracks that won't open in 13. He hopes they will in 8.5. So it should, like I open up projects from Cubase 7 directly, like if I come over here, we could see, I'll open up project. So this might feel good from NAMM 2009. So this is, this project's from Cubase 7. That's what the C7 stands for. So I could just come right over here and open up the project. So I have Groove Agent 1, it's kind of older plug-in version, the precursor to Groove Agent SE. But now, the project will play and open up. So the project file should be able to be opened. So we see Dwight Cunningham. It says, wow, Greg, very powerful. Thanks very much. Cubase is #1. So I guess that was with the ADR functionality. All right, and just further comment from Watch Addict says, makes sense. No idea why his 8.5 won't open and run. He's hoping you can find a copy of 8.5 to install and pair with the key on his dongle. So, you could probably just go to let's look on the website and see. And go to support. We'll go to the downloads area. It might be in unsupported products. So you can see that you have Cubase, Cubase Pro 8.5 that you could just download right from here. So if you wanted to download Cubase 8, we could just come right over here and download it right from the website. So that's where you could download it from. All right, so we have Forward Thinking saying hello from Wales. Just hoping everyone's having a great week. Great to see Pertti Komenen checking in from Finland. Okay, so we see Watch Addicts 12 says, meanwhile, my Steinberg system is crashing. I tried to see if there is even an option to download 8.5 in a list of assorted software. So yeah, you could do it right from the website. And we see also from Watch Addicts just says he rarely updates his Mac, so all was fine at 8.5 until 8.5 stopped opening. So one thing that you could do on Mac is, Mac is, the preferences may get kind of corrupted pretty easily on Mac OS. So when you start Cubase, and I'll open up Cubase 12 to show, hold down Command, Option, plus Shift, right, and hold the keys down right after you start the program. So I'm going to start Cubase 12. I'm going to hold Command, Option, Shift, or Control. And then you'll get this. It says you activated the start mode by pressing these keys, and have him just disable the program preferences and then see if he could get started then. So it could be maybe a corrupt preference if it was working and then isn't opening, or a third-party plugin could be causing that as well. All right, let me just cancel this here. All right, so we have a question from Gareth. Question, in channel settings, if you move the channel strip between pre and post inserts, is the channel strip always pre-fader? If not, are there options to toggle the channel strip between pre and post fader? So I want to say it's always going to be, I want to say by default it would be pre-fader, but let's see if we could do a test. All right, so let's add an audio track. Okay. Okay, so let's go ahead and put dynamics here. So let's put the compressor. All right, and right now we're going to be set. So we right click, we can see that this compressor is going to be pre-fader. Okay, so now as we do this, okay, so we adjust. The compression is still so that compression is still going to be kicking on. So when we come here, let's turn this to post fader. So now when we adjust the fader, it's not having an impact. make sure I have that. All right, so now we're in pre-fader. Still affecting the same amount. We move it to post-fader. That's where the other one went. All right, so let's come here. We'll bypass this and put it on the channel strip. So we'll go to our compressor. So it looks like it's pre-fader. Now let's see if we move this. Yeah, so it looks like they're pre-fader. So we'll bypass that. Yeah. So we move this to. So it looks like they're a pre-fader from the channel strip. And I don't know a way to change that position, but if you didn't want it to be, you could take those same plugins from the channel strip and put them in post-fader insert slots. See from FlyV just says, thanks for all your help, Greg. Since I started here, it really has made a huge difference. I think I may get myself spectral layers. That's great. You'll love it. All right, wonderful to see Charles K. checking in from the UK. Hope you're doing well. All right, so we see from Watch Addict, says if he gets so far as to have a working 8.5, I guess it'll ask to go looking for the product key. Yes, so the product key is actually going to be just on the USB e-licenser. And one thing with the USB e-licenser, so one thing, it could be like when you jump between earlier operating systems. We'll show you, and you could do this. That with earlier operating systems, so depending on the Mac OS, this is good from 10.9, and then if you have older operating systems like 10.7 and earlier, that there is a separate e-licenser download for that. So if you go to elicenser.net, depending on the Mac OS version, they may need to install a later or an earlier e-licenser software. All right, so Watch Addict says, I'm running 13 Pro with a dongle. Now what do I have to do to be able to change it in 2025? So if you have Cubase 13 doesn't utilize the USB e-licenser, it's on the new Steinberg licensing system. All right, so we see Bratman Studio. Hey, Greg, hello from beautiful Uptown Whittier, California. Beautiful day here. Is there a Zoom meeting next week, November 1st? Or I understand you have a cool gig tonight. Wouldn't this be the last Friday of the month? So I don't have a cool gig tonight. I'll be just working, doing my live stream index. But next Tuesday is the last live stream of the month. So we will be doing it Tuesday. I think it's the 29th. So today's 25th, so yeah, 29th. We'll be doing a 2-hour live stream, and then we will move over to the Club Cubase Zoom social meetup. All right, Steven Chen says, I updated to 13 Pro from 10 Pro. I missed the way I rewire Ableton Live. Is there a workaround way to use Ableton Live in Cubase 13 Pro? Thanks. Yeah, so rewire was discontinued by Propeller Heads. So, hence later versions of both Ableton and Cubase are not using the functionality because it's not being supported anymore and not being developed, and is not going to be working on contemporary operating systems. It won't work on Apple Silicon. So, but there really isn't a equivalent at this point for rewire functionality other than synchronizing via MIDI timecode. All right, so Watch Addicts 12 just says, I'll read the notes you link, but are you recommending switching from the dongle to this Cubase 13, or are you saying that we'll all have to change over? So the change has already occurred in Cubase 12 and Cubase 13. So if you're running Cubase 13 and you have a dongle, Cubase 13 isn't accessing that dongle. You may have some plugins, but a lot of those plugins have migrated over to the new Steinberg licensing as well. Okay, so we see from Flyvy who asks, how can I set up the top of the control room for my stereo output? All right, so if you're utilizing the control room, so I'm not sure if it's like when you come here at the top. So the output is going to be defined when we go to your studio menu to audio connections. And generally what you do is you define a output here. Let's just go remove this bus. We define an output here and set it to not connected. And it may seem counterintuitive at first, but we want to have our outputs here. But we're going to, instead of sending the audio through this output, we're going to send it through our control room. So we could right click and add monitors. And then like here I have my Yamaha HS7s, and I'm going over here to my UR24C, and I can see that we have our left and right outputs. So this way we're not kind of doubly sending the signal to the outputs and to the control room. So once you do that, then you have the big knob here for the control room, which will allow you to attenuate or add volume for the monitoring source. All right, Gareth is saying that Pablo's famous and that he is La Leche. I still think he's calling him milk from my high school Spanish. Okay. All right, reading through comments. Thanks, Jazz Dude, for all your help with Watch Addicts 12. Okay, so Tim Weinheimer, sorry for my misunderstanding, says, what I'm wondering if you can import a Spectral Layers type file into Cubase. Is that what you mean? Well, you have both programs open or open in ARA mode. So when we're in ARA mode, what we could do is, instead of having to launch Spectral Layers as a standalone program and save it and then re-import it into Cubase, what ARA is going to allow us to do is through an extension, we'll come over here and say, okay, let's go to Spectral Layers. And now instead of when I double click on a file, it going into the sample editor, I double click, it goes into Spectral Layers. And now I could do all the same functionality in Spectral Layers right here in Cubase. So this way they kind of run concurrently, and when I save my Cubase project, all of these settings will be preserved automatically as well. Okay. So Ashby Unlimited says, in a huge template where there are many instruments loaded, is there a way to unload the instruments or make them dormant until you need them? Yeah. So, and we call it enabling, disabling tracks. So let's say if I have a big, like an orchestral type piece here, I can activate this. So what you could do is just come over here. Let's say this is your template. You could select all of your tracks, right click, and then you could choose to disable the selected tracks. And then you say, oh, okay, now I want to come over here to my violin. I could select this track, right click, enable selected track, and now I could just play that particular violin. But if I select a disabled track, I can't play that until I right click. And many people will have just a keyboard shortcut set up for this or a MIDI remote. And now we can. So again, just right click on the tracks. You'll see enable, disable selected tracks. And when you look for the keyboard shortcut, all you'd have to do, it's going to be under audio. So it may not seem so obvious. And you'll start with disable / enable, and it's one command that will do that. So under audio, disable, enable selected track. So you could just set a key command or use a MIDI remote, like a button on your MIDI controller, to do that as well. All right, Rude Pause asks, how do you set the key editor, the event colors to pitch by default? So I think it will just stay whatever settings that you want. So let's say I want to come here, let's change it to pitch. So I'll just create a new template here. We'll test it. Let me just, and with the template, I think that this might be, so let's do new project. And you may need an actual part within the template. So let's come over here and I'm going to just give myself a couple of negative bars. So let's say we want our template to start right here at measure 1. I'm going to add a MIDI track. And let's switch this to pitch. All right, and we can see that this pitch had automatically stayed. So I'm going to save this. Let's see if I save this as a template. I'm going to, so we'll come over here, save as template. All right, so I'm going to set my value here in the MIDI editor to velocity. I'm going to do a new project. And we'll go to our templates. And we'll see what it gives us. Yep, so if you save it as a template, it will automatically just retain those particular settings for you. So Tim Weinheimer says, you are our hero, Greg. So I'm just here to help everyone else. Jazz Dude is my hero. chat field just jumped. Let me just. Okay, reading through comments. All right, so Timing Guitar says, I noticed Very Audio 3 is much better sounding than 2. So I think it's on 2. But I think it's kind of the same algorithms, but you do have a lot more access to more controls. All right, so wonderful to see Graham Witcher checking in from Oxford, formerly Royal Wooten Bassett. Glad you can make the live stream today. And we have the Heartbreak Time Machine just saying Happy Friday, gang. Timing Guitar says that's why I switched to Mac. I hate Windows 11. I think both operating systems are amazing, and at the same time, they both suck. So once you accept that, they all have their issues. All right, so we see from KD, hey, can you please show how to change sample rate of a sample which I import from Splice? Because I work on 42 and on Splice is mixed and when it's 48, I can't use it without converting. So, you know, you can only have one sample rate in your project, but what you can do is a preference for this. So if your project's at 44.1 and display samples are at 48K, come over here to editing. So you want to go to your preferences or settings, go to editing and go to audio, and you'll see this on import audio files. Just put a check on convert to project setting, and that way as you import a project from Splice at 48K, it's automatically going to do the sample rate conversion to 44.1K for you for your file. So again, go editing, audio, on import audio files. Then you want to just say convert to project settings, and it will automatically convert for you as you import the file. So I think that's probably the best way. All right. See, Rude Pos doesn't have any issues with Windows 11. All right, so we see Tone Vision, Tone Studio. Hi, Greg. Do you know a way to get to access to physical outputs from the interface as an input on Cubase? So a lot of people, you know, one of the things that you could do, it depends on your audio interface. So like my audio interface, I could take inputs. So if I go to like a web page or a different program, I could choose to output, so once it's leaving the audio interface, it's kind of out of Cubase's realm. Some people will take the audio outputs and patch it directly back in. Now you could also set Cubase, if your audio interface has this functionality like the Steinberg UR interfaces, I could set the output here to output. So let's say we go to our studio setup, and when I go to, so I have my Cubase set up as my DAW input, and if I wanted to control, so if I wanted Cubase to go out to a stream, what I could do is like my audio interface has like a loop back functionality. So if I go to my URC control panel, we could see that we could have a loop back function, and I could have different effects on the loop back. And when I go to add an audio track, like if I want to record the audio from a YouTube, I could play YouTube and send its audio output through my Steinberg UR24C streaming music So when I play a sound, and now I could add an audio track and set it up to have my streaming input left and right in stereo. So if I wanted to record audio coming from the live stream back into Cubase with the audio, we could set it up for that. But once it's kind of leaving the audio interface, an easy way is just to take the analog outputs, because that's out of Cubase's control. At that point, it's kind of like left our ecosystem and it's out into the real world. So you could just simply, take the outputs, connect it to two inputs, and record. You could do that, or set up kind of a loop back system within your audio interface if it has those capabilities. A lot of them do. My favorite rock star, Fred Corey, is on. His question is, hi Greg, is there a way to reverse controls in Hallian 7? For example, I'd like to use my cutoff by controlling with the fader. When I push the fader, it opens. I'd like to close with that action. Okay, so let's just create, so I'm going to come over here. Let's go to Hallian, or any instrument. Okay. So I'll just load up something with kind of a filter in it. Okay, so let's say we'll go to voltage here. Okay, so let me just turn off the arpeggiator. And okay, so we want to come over here. Okay, so a lot of times when we are here, one of the great things is we could assign this like to a quick control. So we'll see if this is already set up for a quick control. So I'm going to click on learn, and let's say we want our cutoff here. Okay, or we could just, let's say I want to take this filter here. We could also just right click on it. All right, so we'll say let's assign a quick control here. All right, so I'm going to go to my MIDI remote and say, as we come over, let's see if I have this right on this track. Okay, I'm sorry, I did the wrong one, so. All right, so let's come here. Let me just, sorry about that, Fred. All right, so say cutoff. So I'm going to click on learn. All right, so let me just. I'm just going to start it one more time here. Just so say Hallian 7. I'll do. All right, and I'll just do the advanced. All right, so. All right, so let me set the ARP. All right, we'll come over here to our synth page. All right, so right now we have our filter cut off. All right, and Fred wants to control this, so this is currently being, just make sure I'm in my focus quick controls here. Okay, it's going to be the top, sorry. All right, so Fred wants to reverse that. So what we could do is, I'm going to just, if we start with the MIDI control, I could just do like an untitled page, and let's just see if we could. Okay. Okay, so we have kind of our quick controls. Let me just. All right, let me just. Okay, so when we want to reverse, sorry, it's taking a while to get here. So let's say we'll jump back to our focus quick control. So now, all right. So what we could do on the actual unit when we go to edit. So I'm going to select, let's say we go to our nano control and let's edit the script. Or I'll just show it from scratch, so we're not doing a nano control here, since I don't think Fred has one. But let's come over to our MIDI remote script, and let me plug in my choice OS controller. Okay, so we're just going to set this up from scratch here. All right, now my choice OS controller isn't showing up. Let me just. Okay, so we now have our choice OS controller. Let me see if it's being used somewhere else. Hang on. Okay, sorry, it's taking. Okay. Sorry, my MIDI ports are. Let me see if I can try another controller here real quick. Sorry. Okay, let me just try the nano control one more time. Sorry about this. Okay, so when we go to a particular parameter, one of the things that you could do here is we could say minimum and maximum. So we could say, okay, I want to go to like this controller is not defined, and then we could just flip. So let's say I want this to do quick control 1. We'll apply the mapping, and I want the minimum to be 100% and the maximum to be 0%. So apply mapping. So now as I would adjust a parameter on the synth, we'll come here. And then as I move it up, let me just flip. So now as the fader moves up, the filter closes. So as we would come over here, so again, just Fred, go into like the MIDI remote, double click, and when you go into the mapping assistant, you'll see this little icon here. So right now when I adjust the fader up, we'll see the parameter go down. When I flip this here, when the fader is moved up, the parameter adjusts in the same direction. Click right there in the mapping assistant, and you could reverse the direction of that. So give that a try, Fred. And if you need more help, just reach out. I saw Danny the other night when I was in Nashville. Hope you're enjoying your top secret work project. Everyone Google Fred Corey. Great guy, wonderful composer. All right. All right, so Tireman Guitars says, was that Command Alt Shift? Yeah, so if you wanted to take your particular Cubase, like hold those 3 keys down right after starting Cubase, and then it will automatically put you into safe start mode. All right, so FlyV says, I'm venturing around here today in audio connections. What's Group FX do? How are they set up? So if you always know that you want a particular go-to reverb, a particular go-to delay, what you could do is just come over here, go to your audio connections, and you're always going to use a drum group, maybe a vocal group, guitar group, keyboard group. We can now come over here and say, okay, I want to add a group. This will be my drums group. So now no matter what project I'm in, let's add an effects, and I want this to be, let's say, a mono delay. I want to add another effects. I want this to be a reverb, so that now when I switch between different projects, I could always have these effects available, these groups available and ready to go without having to add them for every single project. So if you're always doing bands, there's probably 99% chance that you're going to use a drum group. If you're always starting off with your favorite reverbs, delays, maybe chorusing, time-based effects, you could have those preloaded so that every time you start a project, those plugins are available and to access without having to load them up every time. Wonderful to see Sable Winters on. She's like number 95, and she's in San Francisco Bay Area. Hope you're well. All right, so we have Daniel just sending love from Croatia. Glad you can make it. All right, so we see Sable Winters just says, question, Greg, please demonstrate the building of vocal harmonies from splices. I guess maybe like a small section of audio. So let's come over and take a look. So we'll just say, okay, let's do... So I'm going to figure out what the chords are for the project here. So let's say we'll take this project. So the guitars have the chords. So I'm going to drag the guitar or the MIDI part, piano part, to a chord track, and we have our chords automatically determined. So we come here.
Do you recall the day we first met? That was a long, long time ago. In the 7th grade in the school parking lot, waiting on our yellow coach to ferry us home.
So let's say I want to take this phrase right here. I'm going to select this phrase. So we'll just listen to it. I'm just using the range tool.
You look my way and your heart shone through.
And now since I have that range selected, we'll go to our audio menu and we will say generate harmony voices. And we can do up to 4 voices. I'll do 3. And I'll just kind of bring their volumes down slightly here, just so that they're more in context as background vocals.
Very you look my way and your heart shone through. You caught my breath while you called me too.
So let's say, okay, we'll just come here and say I want to add harmonies right at the end of that phrase. So select it, and we can now come over and audio menu, generate harmony voices. So as we do this, we can...
You look my way and your heart shone through. You caught my breath while you called me too.
And since we're deriving it from the chord track, the harmonies will be musically correct. So select the range. And then go to audio, generate harmony voices. Okay, so we see David Furvig says, I use Cubase Live at shows for all my vocal effects and mixing, all the band members. Plus, I can run automation for all guitar, VST, patch changes, distortion on and off. Any more tricks? One of the things that I always liked doing, if we were doing like a live show, is I would set up the arranger tracks. So a lot of times, I notice like a lot of artists may go between like 2 or 3 sets in a particular performance. So, they may alter on a tour, every other night they may do this song versus this song. So let's say we have everything set up in one long project. And let's say each of these arranger chain events are a song. All right, so what we could do now is say, okay, this would be set 1, let's say, and then if we wanted a variation, so let's say in this set we don't do song, we don't do song D. Now I could come over here and have a different arranger chain. So we'll say, well, let's create a new chain. So we go, okay, now I want to go A, B, C, D, F. So we could have kind of different variations. So we could say A, B, C, E, F, and this one we want A, B, C, D, F. And you could set up the MIDI remote, so you could play this part of the song, play that part, you have jump mode, so you can say, play until, like, once we get into the settings here, there's different options for how you want the arranger chain to play until the next one starts. And you could set up a MIDI foot switch to immediately jump between songs if you wanted to. So a lot of artists will have one particular long project and they could navigate freely. They could turn on and off, like a loop for a particular section as well. So they have a foot switch while they're in this to automatically, select this event and then activate a loop. So if you need to do a loop to vamp parts. But yeah, lots of people doing great stuff in Cubase for live work. All right, Neo Dungle Experience says, thanks a lot, sir, for the answers. And one thing, just like the video editor, can I record my audio for electric guitar solo with a backing track and make it sync with the video that I've imported inside of Cubase? So yeah, once you have the video inside of Cubase, anything that you record, so if you have the audio, you could play a guitar over it. And then once you're done, you could choose to export the video and you could render a new video file or replace the audio in the video file. So yeah, lots of people use that for different functions. So Memento is like 100, it seems. All right. So 5E says he's looking forward to the Zoom meeting on Tuesday. All right, so we see Gareth just says, did I miss my question per chance? Let me just see if there's... See what the question was, Gareth. I'm just scrolling back. If you want to ask your question again, we can make sure to get to it. Just come back about an hour or so. Don't see that. Sorry, Gareth, if I missed it, but please ask again. Gareth says Retrolog equals the best. Right, so Larry B asks, hi Greg, with the Nuendo cross-platform upgrade, having Cubase Pro 13, will I be able to continue to use and then upgrade the existing Cubase 13 when 14 and other versions come out? Yes, you will be able to. So the two will function independently. So you could update both of them like as you see fit. So no problem. All right, Tireman Guitar says, I have a question. Do all the sounds and patches from Patch Shop Pro 1 version 1 come with Patch Shop version 2? So yes, so when we come over, let's go ahead and say we want to add an instrument track, or we could actually just see it over here as well. So if we come over to Media, we'll go to our VST Instruments, and we'll go to Patch Shop, and we can see these were the Patch Shop 1, these are Patch Shop 2, so all of the presets will work from Patch Shop 1 in Patch Shop 2. Let's see, according to Gareth, that me and Pablo are like Mackie pals now. All right. Gareth is telling people to remember to enable the like. All right, Ashby Unlimited says, thank you earlier for the answer, Greg. Does disabling a track also give back memory? So yeah, it's not, when a track is disabled, it's not utilizing memory or any CPU usage. It's totally disabled. All right, we have Tiago checking in from Newcastle in the UK. via Brazil. Hope you're doing well in the UK, enjoying yourself. All right, my chat field jumped. Let me find. Okay. Okay, so Sable Winter says, I've been wondering what value is SoundCloud. Just learned that 22% of listeners' engagement of comments, reposts, favorites, playlists are electronic music, EDM, trance, lo-fi, chill, ambient. Yeah, so it's hard to figure out how to approach all of the different streaming services. Okay, so Timing Guitars just says he still loves his Hagen Symphonic Orchestra. All right, so Tiago just says, question, Greg, could you solve the copy automation lines from stereo out to another track, how it could be done with many more than 30 automation lines? So, if you're doing a lot of, automation lines with, the stereo out, if you have like 30, it could take a while, but what you want to do is, let's say we go to your input-output channels. Let's say I have my volume set up here. I have, let's say, we have a linked panner. Why not? All right. I want it to have low cut on. I want it to, come over here. So you'd have to, choose to say, okay, I want this to be muted at a particular point. Why not? And if we wanted to apply these to a group channel, so let's add a stereo group. So in my group channel, I would want to open up the same automation lanes. So we say, okay, we have volume, and if you have 30, you're going to have, the easiest way is just to come here and match these up. I know it could be a pain. So let's say now I want it to be my input filter LC on, and this way it will carry over. And let's say we want it mute here. Sorry, let's come here and say linked panner. All right, so now I could select all of these events. And we'll say select all events, copy, select these events here, and I'm going to paste at origin. So you could do it just like that, but you will have to open up all the automation lanes here, match the corresponding automation lanes, and then just you could paste 30 automation lanes at once, but you will have to, like, if you're sending it to another group at that point, open up the same exact automation parameters. Okay, Gareth says, raise your glasses to Jazz and Greg. Or spectacles. You can see Gareth says, I'm the ultimate diplomat, that everything is great and awful at the same time. I do live in Washington, D.C. area, so I get to learn some diplomacy that way. All right, so we see, please, how can I boost the vocal? In Cubase, for example, in FL Studio, use Maximizer. So you could use the same thing in Cubase. So let's come over to project with some vocals. Let me just find one here. Okay, so let's say that we're here. So let's say my vocals are too soft. You know, one of the things you could do is just grab the clip gain automation or clip gain value. You could always adjust the volume here. If that wasn't enough, you could come over and say, okay, I want a maximizer. Let's go to your dynamics, and you'll see there's also a pre-gain. So if you don't want to use a plugin, when you open up the channel settings and go to the EQ area, you can see gain control here. So you get 24 dB of gain there. So a number of different areas to get gain, and some will be at different stages. Like this will be gain before it comes into the channel, the pre-gain. So, or you could use a maximizer plugin, a compressor, raise the volume on the clip, or raise the volume on the fader if necessary. So there's like multiple ways of adding gain to a vocal. All right, we have Something Nut sending greetings from Taiwan. Thanks for joining us. All right, so see Tiago just saying feature request to use the marker track and Very Audio. Use the marker track to add lyrics from vocals. So I'll pass that along. Jazzy is also recommending use the vocal chain plugin. Gareth is also recommending Squasher as a plugin. All right. All right. All right, so we see from Jazzy Lamel, who asks, hey Greg, greetings. Can you explain some tips and tricks on how to use the sizing tool, the one with the circle around it in the top left? So usually, this is kind of the sizing tool that, that I utilize mostly because, and there's different ways of using the tool. So let's say I want to come here. We'll take this event. All right, so as we look at this event here, we could say, okay, I want to just kind of truncate the start or the end, and this is the default mode for that. So we can say, okay, I want this clip only to play to the end of that measure. Now there's also a mode, and if you hit the 1 key, you may notice that we go to different sizing modes, and we'll get a little indication here. The secondary mode is we call sizing moves contents. So I have the first event selected here. I want that first event to fall, and then we keep the same length, but we could move the contents within the particular file. So I say I need the end of that file to come in right there. The third mode that we could do, and maybe this is it, this is a sizing applies time stretch. So you can say I need this file to fit into that amount of space. I need that file to fit into that amount of space, and that will time stretch, kind of compress and change the length of the audio file to automatically fit the particular size of the event. So we have normal sizing, which just truncates. Sizing moves content, which will take the beginning or end and keep the same length. And if we wanted to change the length of the overall file, we could do the sizing applies time stretch. All right, we're seeing Gareth just saying subtlety is key, especially using some of the dynamics plugins, like the vocal chain, also Razor and Squasher. All right, wonderful to see Jan was able to make it today. You had some family commitments. We appreciate everything you do with the Cubase Index. All right, we see Val is mixing he's already at the venue and he's mixing, but popped in. Thanks for that. Okay, reading through comments here, trying to catch up. All right, so we have Fernando A. Gallegos, just says, hi, Greg and everyone. Thanks for joining us. Jazz Dude posted a Fred Corey video. All right, so Pro 5000 just says, hello, sir. I can't see follow chords in Inspector for audio track. So should be able to do it. And it's not going to be doing the chords for like polyphonic material. But let's come over here. And we'll go to a project that Fred Corey has lent me that I've used many times. Everyone on live streams has heard this a lot. Thank you, Fred. We appreciate all of your tracks that you've lent to the Cubase community. Okay, so let's come over here and let's say we do a chord track. So we'll come and let's just say I will add a chord track. And we'll take our bass part here. So we'll just okay, so now we'll come here. All right, so we'll listen to like the bass part. Just kind of get our tonality. All right, so now what I'm going to do is we select the chords here, and we're going to say follow chord track, and we'll say, okay, we will do our scales. And now as we listen to the bass part, or if we just say follow root notes. And if we choose for it not to follow, so rewind, and we tell it to follow the chords. But this is going to work for like monophonic parts like bass, saxophone, vocals, where it'll follow the chords, but it's not going to do like pianos or guitar parts that are playing chords. Alright, so we see Sable Winters has not touched Flux, Pad Shop, or Sketch yet. And then she asks, please demonstrate Pad Shop. So Pad Shop is a granular synthesizer. And what is really interesting is, you know, for if you're doing kind of sound design tasks, we'll come over and we'll add an instrument track here. We'll just do a little Pad Shop action. So let's go ahead and, you know, just so what this is actually doing is taking, you know, if we were to think of a piece of glass, like a glass window, as sand, in essence, and, you know, we think of glass as being made from sand. And what Pad Shop will allow you to do is to take, you know, instead of doing synthesis on a glass, it'll kind of do synthesis at the sand level of the glass. So I'm going to come here and let's just play this particular sound, and I'm just going to drop a sample in. So it's just fine. So I'm going to take that sound and drop it in. You know, so like any type of so I can take that in and out. Then we can adjust the speed, the number. So any type of sound you could just drop in and have kind of total, you know, incredible sound design journey, just making new sounds. All right, so see, Gareth says, I guess you missed this question about the channel settings and the channel strip. No worries, I may have missed your answer. So yeah, we did go through that earlier. So I think is the channel strip is pre-fader is what we figured out. All right, so we see Sable Winters says she hasn't used Iconica Sketch. So Iconica Sketch will actually show up in Hallian Sonic or Hallian. So when we go to your instrument track here, we could just say, let's go to Hallian Sonic and Iconica Sketch, you'll just see it as one of the icons here as you scroll down. And now we have the option of we'll play just a minute or two. We'll play a little bit of Iconica Sketch here so you can hear it. And I'll just play this, and I have to go answer my door. I have in-laws visiting today. Bear with me just a second. But this is Iconica Sketch. And let me revert this. All right, so all of those sounds are just included with Cubase, so you can do lots of great orchestral mock-ups. All right, and just another follow-up point from Gareth's question about the channel strip. So I don't think there's a way to do post-fader, so I think that they're pre-fader. All right, Sway TV says on backup, I'm backing up a project, say that I left the track on mute, will be excluded from the backup. Sometimes I have alternate mixing versions and say my last save was with a muted track for that mix, or should I back up the project besides just a file, besides just a file explorer? So if we choose to take this particular project here, we'll back this up. So I'll mute projects. I'll mute two tracks, let's say flute and oboe. And we'll choose the backup project. All right. Okay, so we backed up that. I'm going to close this project and let's open the backup. So I believe that they'll just be backed up, but the tracks will be muted. So let's open it up. All right, so here's our file. So those tracks will be included, but still just muted. Sorry that we had audio problems last live stream. It's always fun making sure, bringing a bunch of equipment while you travel to do a live stream and then have the internet wig out on you. All right, Ray Mayorga asked, hi Greg, how do I save a sample in Halion 7 and how do I change the disk pathway to where to save? Okay, so we'll open up a Halion 7. Okay, so we'll say we have our file here, and now we want to drag a sample in. Okay, so now, so at this point we would come over to the program tree here on the right hand side, and then you could right click and you'll see export samples. So at this point we could change the sample path to wherever you want, the file location, and then you could save it with all of the samples right here. So this is the sample name, the sample path. So again, once you're there, click on the program tab up top, and then you could just right click and export samples, and then you can set your path right there. Okay, FlyV asks, says, I'm on a roll today, Greg. What's external effects in the audio connections? So when we go to your audio connections here for external effects, a lot of times people may have like a favorite hardware compressor, or they bought a Lexicon 480L 30 years ago for $10,000, and by golly, they're still going to use it because they spent $10,000 on it 30 years ago. So what an external effect is going to allow us to do is we could connect the external effect into audio inputs and outputs of our audio interface. So we say, okay, I have a distressor here. It's going in and out of these connections of my audio interface. And at that point, I can just come right over here. And when I want to add, let's say, an audio track, and I want it to go out to the distressor, all I would have to do is go to my inserts. And we'll see, okay, let's go to my external plugins. We go to the distressor. Now, but sometimes when you're going out to external processors, they could have their own latency. And by the time the signal leaves your computer, goes into the piece of hardware through the cables, it may go through, if you have a digital effects processor, it may have its own stage of conversion, which has its own latency. And by the time that signal gets back to Cubase, it could be out of time. So what we do is actually measure the delay, and that will automatically delay compensate all of the external processors so that they play in time. So this allows you to still use external processing when utilizing inside of the software realm. All right, so we see from Roland Seth, hi Greg, thanks for answering my earlier questions about the integration of Dorco and Cubase. Fingers crossed for a closer tie-in between the two. Just one more question about Dorco, please. I've noticed that when recording direct into Dorco 5 from my keyboard, that there's significant latency, maybe 300, 400 milliseconds, but there's no noticeable latency in Cubase. Any ideas, please? So it could be that perhaps, there might be plugins. If you're using any audio plugins, those could be causing latency. But, just like Cubase has its buffer settings, those same buffer settings are available inside of Dorco. So we'll just open it up and show you where it's going to be found under the preferences. All right, so we'll come over here. We'll just create new. All right, so we'll create a quick project here. And now we'll go to our Dorco preferences. And then it's going to be under play as you kind of scroll down. your audio device setup. And then you'll see the device control panel, and this is, make sure that you have the buffer size here adjusted. So this could be a completely independent value of the buffer size from Cubase to Dorico. So in Cubase I'm at 512, Dorico I'm at 256. So make sure that your buffer size is where you might expect it to be, and give that a try. All right, we see champagne glasses to everyone here, to myself, Jazz Dude, Agent K, and Jan, and Michael Teams. Michael Teams is giving a big woohoo to Sable. All right, so we see George Robinson says hello from Atlanta, Georgia. Can you convert two mono left-right files from MediaBay into a stereo file, or do you need to import the two files onto mono Cubase tracks to be converted? I think, you know, it would make sense that it's going to be done. I think let's take a quick look and just, I can see where it makes sense to not do it in MediaBay, where MediaBay is reflecting all of the files that are on the system. But let's go take a quick look. All right, let me just record two mono files so I don't mess up a project. Okay. All right, so let's look at it in MediaBay now. Sorry, let me just. Okay, so. Right. Yes, I think the conversion is going to be done inside of Cubase. So let's say if we jump back here, I take these two mono files, I go to project, and we go to convert tracks. We can say mono to multi-channel. So let's say, okay, we want this to be selected tracks. We'll keep our source tracks. Okay, let me just, with mono, let me just check. So again, project menu, we'll say mono to multi-channel. And let me just select the tracks here. So now we have a stereo file, and now when we go into our pool window and refresh, we could see that we have the stereo file there. So we could think of the media bay as more designed for showing like the different files, but not doing processing necessarily on it. We could do that within the sample editor, or you could, you know, just do it within a project window. And as we make a change, like we did the conversion here, that it automatically reflects inside of media bay as well. All right, so we see Pugis, just says, hey, Cubase is the best DAW, for my opinion. I think a lot of people's opinion. All right, so we see from Recyclop, is there any way to fix the channel settings window on top of the screen similar to plugins? Okay, so let's say if we open up the channel settings here, any way to fix the channel settings window on top of the screen similar to plugins? So I'm not sure if the plugins are fixed to the top of the screen or if you want this to be fixed to the top of the screen. So I think this will automatically open up in its last known state. So if I come here, come there, it will open up in its last known state. So let's say now I open this one up and I put it at the bottom. If this is what the question is about, that will automatically return to the windows. And if you want this to always be on top, you could just right click and choose always on top, like how plugin windows can pop on top. All right, so another question from Gareth, who asks, sorry, just my Gareth's question is, talk dim level should set the amount of dim in a control room, but it doesn't change anything at the moment. I'm sure I'm missing something. All right, so let's say we're playing back a track. I will come and let's put in just an oscillator here for test tones. Before I do that, I'll make sure that the control room is down so I don't kill everyone. All right. Okay, so we look at this. We see our control room. Now let's come over, and when we do our talk back, and then so we have our talk dim amount here. So that when talkback is on, it's automatically dimming it by minus 30 dB. And let's see if we dim this to infinity, that when talkback is turned on, it's turned on. So let me just make sure. It says even if I reduce to level to infinity, the dim seems to work by default level. So it seems like, so when we do this, we hear the track dim down. I set the dim level lower. As I adjust my dim level here to infinity, we now don't hear it. Now we can hear kind of the silence. So that seems to work as expected. Let me see if there's any preferences that could maybe throw that off. Let me see if you have the use phones channel, if that makes a difference. Yep, still seems to. So let me know if I'm doing something differently than you are, Gareth. And it seems like that's working as I would anticipate and expect it to. And also check, I guess it could be, check these preferences, because if this is set to only in record, let's take a listen. Yeah, I mean, it seems like that's working for me, but let me know if I did anything differently than you did, Gareth. Okay. All right, great to see Gerald Ely back. All right, so we see Flyvy. How can I get instrument samples to play along with the chord track? So if you want them to follow the chord track, again, we'll just do a quick example here. Okay, so I have a chord track set up, and you could basically tell the MIDI tracks to follow the chords and scales. So let's say we have this in so we'll get kind of our G major tonality in our heads here. All right, now let's change it to G minor. So I'm going to take the chord track here, and let's make this D minor. And let's take this to the relative minor here. And let's say I want to transpose these up. Now we'll go back to our original key. So once you have the tracks set to follow chords and scales for each of these, once you have the chord track, then you can just have all of your instrument tracks follow the chord track. So that way someone says, I really want something like Bach, but sad. You could take a MIDI file and just make it minor. Okay, so Gareth says, finally found where he answered it. Jazz Dude just says, Cubase a miracle for composers. All right, Perch Hunter asks, is Iconica Sketch and Howie and Orchestra in Cubase 13 Pro the same as in Iconica from latest Dorco? I wonder if I can install them only with Cubase installation and just set Cubase folder for Dorco. So you should be able to, because it's not a specific Cubase folder. So once the content is installed, it is available to the other instruments. So it's always in kind of an instrument or an application independent location, so that when you open up Dorco, it uses the same instruments as it does from Cubase. Okay. See, Pablo just says drag and drop the MIDI files works. That's cool. All right, Uno Memento just saying to Gerald Ely that the Grand 3 is awesome. All right, you see the Pablo saying Michael Teams is campus or famous. We'll just say Michael Teams is campus. Sounds good. He's a smart guy. All right, so we see all right, Mike Chatfield just jumped. All right, so we see from Roland Stuff who says, great, thanks, Greg. Buffer size. Dorco buffer size now adjusted. I'm slow to get my head around Dorco and Cubase being separate entities. Thanks again. So yeah, but both of the teams are working very hard together. Okay, so we see Flyvy is it's going out to his mom and dad's, and he's going to finish watching later tonight from there. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we see from George Robinson says the files originally were stereo but show as mono left and right in Media Bay. I guess I got stereo from a different DAW is why. Okay, thanks and enjoy your weekend. Yeah, sometimes there's naming conventions that will automatically be applied. Like if someone is rendering a file, you could have it with different naming conventions so it's recognized and could be split by other DAWs. All right, so we see Cyclops says, thanks, Greg. Yes, there's a right click and always on top that was missing. Tried to find a button or setting for it. Thanks. That's what keeps me employed. All right, so Gareth is saying, I don't have that talk back button bar. Okay, so it could be if you go, check. So when I come here, like some of the additional parameters are exposed. When you hit the main, they're kind of tucked under. So click here on the main and see if you have the adjustments here for the talk dim. You'll see kind of the talk back. You can turn that on and off, but if you want more parameters below that, try just clicking on the main tab here, and then that will expose those for you. All right, so you see Gareth figured out the talkback. Dim was in the preferences. It's great. Okay, so we see TB80 says, please, I need a new mic. So I can't really help you on the live stream with that, but I'm sure you can buy some great mics. There are a lot of great. All right, so Gareth is just saying sad Bach. So, all right, so let me jump to some questions that we had mailed in. Thanks for all the great questions. All right, so we covered the first one already. So we see here are my questions. Number one, is there a way to see if the cursor mode is in return to start visually on the program so I don't have to guess which setting it is in? So with version 12, what you do is, or version 13 rather, if you go to your transport and you go to your start mode, you could see if return to start position is on. So when it's enabled, so again, you could just go to your transport and go to your start mode, and you can see if return to start position on stop is automatically turned on. In previous versions, I would set a keyboard shortcut to turn the preference on and off, and you will get a preference when the preference is changed. You'll see the preference, the value of the preference, the current setting of the preference will pop up in a little black window on the project window so you could see. So I would just hit and I assigned a keyboard shortcut of shift plus the space bar. And that way, as I changed it and toggled the preference on and off with that keyboard shortcut, it would send a quick message to display which mode it was currently on. But they had moved the return to start position from kind of a hidden preference that people couldn't find to now coming over to the start mode, and just you'll see the return to start position on stop in a more obvious place within the transport menu. All right, let me jump to my project here. Next question. Is there a way to select the range and then create a new arranger track section to follow the range? Okay, so let's say, let's see if I have it. Activate this. Okay, so one of the preferences that I like for this particular task, so if we wanted to create kind of a range marker based upon cycle selection, I'm going to grab the range tool here and then hit the letter P. So now I have an arranger track. I'm going to double click between the range right there, and that will automatically create a cycle marker. So I could hit P, and then whatever, that will set the left and right locators, and then I could double click with the range tool between the left and right locators. Now, a preference that could speed this up even more so you don't have to remember to hit the letter P is if we come over to the preferences here, and under editing we could say it's cycle follows range selection. So again under preferences or settings, you'll go to the editing preferences, cycle follows range selection. And now when I select a range, the cycle markers are automatically set based on the range. So I could do that and then double click, select a range, double click with the range tool between the left and right locators on the arranger track. So it's not an automatic way, but it's pretty easy to deal with right there. So set the range, and if you don't have that preference set, hit the letter P, then double click with the range tool between the markers, the left and right markers, and at that point you could create the arranger event based upon that particular value. Okay, next question. If I want to compare two tracks, say two mixes on different tracks, if I select both tracks, how do I jump back and forth between them with the solo mode so I can instantaneously hear one then the other? Okay, so, and this could also be a preference. So we'll come over here to the preferences, and I think it's going to be under project and mix console. You'll see enable solo on selected track. So preferences or settings, to editing, to project and mix console, enable solo on selected track. So right now when I come over here and I want to go back and forth between these tracks, I would hit S and we could solo this. Then when I select this track is soloed. I select this track, that track is soloed. I come here to this track, that is soloed. So whatever track I select, I don't have to mute to the other tracks. I just come here, select the track, and that will engage solo on the particular track. So you could instantaneously go back and forth without having to stop, unsolo this, solo that. So then you could just quickly jump back and forth. So again, that preference is just going to be, and you'll just solo one of the tracks and with that preference enabled. So we come over here, preferences, to editing, to project and mix console, enable solo on selected track. Okay, so we had a question, how to record the outputs for multiple virtual instruments to a single audio track. Okay, so let's come over here. Let's say I have these particular tracks. So we'll solo these, and we'll just have these pass MIDI. So let me just erase this. All right, so just so we can hear the three tracks, just all right, let just see if I have my control room configured in a weird way. Okay, let me just try to revert the project here. Sorry about that. All right, let me just see if it's playing back. Let me check my connections here, make sure I didn't change. All right, should be hearing. Okay. See if I have. Let me just check the output routing of the instruments here. Sorry, not sure what. Oh, it's set to no bus, so let me set this to stereo out. Okay, sorry about that. Hate having brain cramps. Okay, so when we go to listen to this, we're going to say, I want to take this sound, and this sound, and layer these all together. So what we want to do is just to record the audio output of these three instruments. So what I'm going to do is select the three instruments, and I'm going to right click, and we're going to add a group channel, and we'll call this group VSTI. I'm now going to add an audio track, and we'll set the input for that track to come from group VSTI. So make sure that my instrument tracks are record enabled and that my audio track is record enabled. So basically the output of these instruments is now going to the group, and the group is now right here. And this is what's feeding the audio input. And let's make that a stereo track. That would help. So let me just add another track. So we'll add audio track. We'll make it stereo, and we'll set it to the VSTI output. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to say, and all we have to do is hit record. And then we could record the MIDI and the audio simultaneously. All three parts can be fed into an audio track. So feed it in, if you need to do multiple tracks, feed it into a group. Take that group, and then we want that. And this group is in mono. So now when we come over here, I could just record all three of those sources. Together, or multiple sources right there. Okay, next question. I have a couple more questions for you. What's the point of having musical mode function? Is there anything negative about having it switched on? If not, why not remove that option and always have it on automatically behind the scenes so you wouldn't have to ever think about it? because there's a lot of times you may not want your tracks to be in musical mode. So let's say we did a tempo detection of a track. So we come over, we'll do just a quick new project here. And we have an audio file. Okay, I'll just import a quick audio file. So sometimes you want something is kind of, we'll think of it in Christopher Nolan terms, the constant. So we will come over and say we want to play something that's YouTube friendly. Okay, so as we're here, I want to take this track and I wanted to put like Groove Agent on top of it. So we'll come over, we're going to put this on to track 1. So I want to come over here. I don't want this track to change time. I want other tracks to change time to this. So if I put on my metronome, no correlation. I do my tempo detection. So now when I add a track to this, I don't want this track to change time when it's in musical mode. So this track, I want to stay in this actual time, because if I put this in musical mode and I dropped other tracks in, this track may change the time. But I'm trying to have other tracks and other instruments automatically play and follow the timing of this. So, and also, let's say if you were composing to a film and you want there's something that goes on in the background and you want like a cymbal sound or a ding, a bell that happens exactly when that moment occurs in the video. And if you change the tempo of the song, if you're in musical mode, you change the tempo, that bell would then shift in time, because if you're in musical mode and change the tempo, that adjusts the timing of the particular events. But if it's not in musical mode, you could speed up all the tracks and that bell would still play back at that time position, not the bar and beat position. So there's a lot of times where it makes sense to have different elements that are in musical mode and other elements that are kind of the source files that the musical mode is set to follow and use that timing of the source tracks. So that's why certain tracks will allow you to, so you want the source tracks so that musical events can follow to the source tracks. So we see I'm about to start working more with MIDI. Can you show us some tips and tricks when working with MIDI? So when you're doing MIDI stuff, so MIDI is incredibly flexible, and we can think of it as a language. All right, so when we think of MIDI, there's, you hear the term MIDI channels a lot. So every MIDI port, so we used to have like a MIDI port, can have 16 MIDI channels. There can be 128 notes. Each note, when you play a key down, will actually, so let me just show you here. When you enter a key in, and we can see this graphically, we can say, okay, like we could look at this and say, okay, this pitch is, and we can see C#3. And if I want to change the pitch, I can come right over here. Now MIDI notes of the same pitch can't overlap. Only one note can play on one pitch at a time. So if you want this note to be softer, you could decrease the velocity or increase the velocity. And this is like really effective with drums. Now let's say this note was a cello or a violin that was holding out, or a trumpet, and you wanted that note to get louder and softer. So this note is only going to be for the attack, the velocity of how hard you press the key down. And when we want to come over here, and if we want to change the sound, the volume, while the note is playing, we can come over here and just draw in what's called a MIDI continuous controller. So we could have volume control of just the MIDI. Now, when we see MIDI data itself, we could think of this as like letters. So let's say there's a lot of languages that use common letters: English, French, Spanish, German, Italian. We kind of use common letters. We go to Asia, there's different letters. If you go to the Middle East, to Eastern Europe, there's different letters. Now, when we record MIDI data, we're just recording that these notes were pressed down at this time, this hard, for this long. The actual sound doesn't get recorded. So you could take a MIDI file and come over and take that same exact information. Since the sound isn't embedded, isn't a part of the MIDI file, but rather the notes themselves, we can take those MIDI notes and change different instruments. So while this may be set up for a cello, if I change the sound for this track to play back through a synthesizer or through an electric bass or a guitar or a Fender Rhodes sound, we could change the sound because MIDI itself doesn't have the actual sound. It's just a note on, note off message. It was played this hard, this long. I increased the volume with MIDI CC7. But that's one thing that could be confusing for a lot of people is, that MIDI actually doesn't have sound. It sends the sounds to a virtual instrument, which is the more practical and common method now, or it would send it to a synthesizer or like a rack module. And synthesizers, rack modules, and drum machines, we used to refer to them as tone generators, because the MIDI information got sent there and it generated the sound, and we would take the sound out of those devices into a mixer. And now we could do all of that internally with Cubase. So, all right, next question. Can you add articulation maps for all MIDI instruments so you can clearly see in the editor what the switch keys of an instrument are doing? So there's a lot of instruments like synthesizers that don't have articulation maps. So you don't switch the sounds through articulations. Mostly like orchestral instruments will allow you to do that, so that you could switch between like pizzicato, legato, staccato. So any instrument that is designed, and most of these will be sample based, but any instrument that is designed to have different layers of sounds that you could switch back and forth between, you can create an expression map in Cubase just by going to your MIDI menu, to your expression map setup, and you can create an expression map. If it's a Hallian based instrument, you can have that expression map automatically generated for you, so you don't have to make it. But if you had a Fender Rhodes patch, you probably don't have articulations. A violin patch, yes. If you go to a synthesizer, you may use the modulation wheel to change the sound, but it's probably not going to be articulations. So not every instrument will have articulations, but it really depends upon the design intentions of the instrument. All right. Another question says, Greg, in my previous version of Cubase, the automation track had a clear blue line that you could see from across the room. In Cubase 13, the automation lines are nearly invisible. Is there any way to make the automation lines thicker and darker? So let's take a look at it. So when we want to open up like the automation line here, so we'll just open this up. Sometimes, so let's go ahead and, so we see our automation lines. I'm going to just draw in some automation here. So I think, and I have not such great eyesight, but I think that is pretty clear for like the automation values. And when you hover over, you could see the automation nodes pop up. So as we do that, so here we could see those automation nodes automatically pop up right there. So I think that's pretty easy and clear to see like that. But let me know, so as soon as I open up the automation, I think that's I don't look at that and say, oh, that's too subtle to see. But let me know if other people see it differently. All right, so we had a question. Hi, Greg. Is there a way to hide tracks that only have muted events and show only tracks that have one or more unmuted events? I've included a picture as an example. In this picture, there are 10 or so tracks, could be many more. As you can see, there are 3 tracks that show unmuted events at the cursor. Cursor is for information only. Unmuted events could be anywhere. The desired outcome is for only the 3 tracks with the unmuted events to stay visible, and all the other tracks should hide. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at the example here. So let me revert to this. All right, so in their example, they wanted to, if the track, my understanding was they wanted these to be hidden or deleted, depending on, like if this track had no events that were unmuted, that this track should be hidden, and tracks that had events that we could get rid of those particular events, the muted ones, but keep the original. So a way to do this, and I came up with kind of a project logical editor, and I chose to do a delete as opposed to, let's come over here and I want to say, let's go to delete empty tracks. Okay. Okay, so this is set to, we want to delete, container type is a track, and property is set to empty. So if there's no data, we're going to delete the track. And we could choose to hide the track if you want to. And I did this also, we'll say, and I incorporated this as a function of another project logical editor. So we'll make that project logical editor first. And again, delete, container type is a track where the property is set to is empty. Now the other preset that I made is sorry for typo. Okay, so I made another project logical editor. We're going to select a container type that's equal to an event. The property is set to is muted. I want to delete those muted events, and then we're going to run that other project logical editor. Now this will work in conjunction with a preference. So you could leave this preference on for a lot of different things, but you could also enable it. So if we come over here to editing, project and mix console, there is let me make sure, see if it's under editing. Track selection follows event selection. So if I select an event, I'm going to have this preference turned on. So when I come over here, so I want to get rid of tracks that are muted. And I want to get rid of muted tracks on events. And if there's no events that are unmuted, I want that track to be hidden or erased. So if I did this all right, I'm going to come over here. So we see that we have muted events here. These 2 tracks are only muted events. I'll hit apply. And now those tracks will be gone and only the unmuted events will remain. So again, using those 2 project logical editors in conjunction with each other, you could just do that. So all right, so we have a question. says I connected a Mackie Big Knob monitor controller to use the outputs from Cubase 10. Since I hooked up the Big Knob, my computer keyboard produces MIDI sounds when pressing a key on it, not being the on-screen piano keyboard that Cubase offers, also resulting in some errors leading Cubase to freeze up. So some settings appear to be messed up now. It says working with the Big Knob in Cubase 13 works fine. What can I do to get these acting normal again? So, generally I think the Big Knob, the monitor controller, shouldn't have an effect on the shouldn't have an effect. I think that's just going to be like audio goes in, you have the knob to attenuate or adjust the volume, and the audio goes out. So I don't think it's actually connected to the computer. If it is, for some reason, like the USB is connected to the computer, I would come over to the studio setup and make sure that when you go into, if it's like set up for like a Mackie control, that you don't have the MIDI input or output connected to in all MIDI inputs. So, or when you go to the MIDI port setup, that when you, let me clear my throat. That when we are here, we'll see in all MIDI inputs that you don't have the Mackie control configured. So if you're doing that, but there's nothing in Cubase, and we had, I'm not sure if this is the kind of the question we had addressed earlier about the keyboard that's making sounds, so make sure that there's no other utilities, that it turns your MIDI keyboard into a controller somehow as well, because that could also kind of cause what you're describing. All right, let me jump back to our live questions. Thanks for all the great questions, and you could send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right. All right, so we see Sway TV, who just says, what's your opinion if I need multi-format mix masters? Should I export the project, for example, a 16-bit 44.1K, a 24-bit 44.8 or 48K, etc., versus a mix and convert it to the needed formats? So I know some people will, take whatever sample rate they're working at. If they're working at, like, let's say 96K, they will take their project and export it as a 32-bit 96K. You could deliver it to multiple formats if you need to. You could do that easily in Cubase using export queues. You could also come over, and if you have Wavelab, you could take a file in Wavelab and do a multi-export, so that I could export to 5 or 6 different formats of your choice and put it into necessary subfolders for each format. But it's whatever kind of the final delivery is. If you're handing off to a mastering engineer, you could ask them exactly what they're kind of expecting to see, or what would be good for them, but always deliver kind of the highest resolution. Always, if you're in Cubase, do the highest resolution. You don't necessarily have to change the sample rate, but do a 32-bit floating point file, because that way if there's any like one sample that clips, it's not a problem. But then at that point, you could export to other file formats as well. But if you're kind of doing it all yourself, you could just do it all from within Cubase, or Nuendo, or Wavelab has that great functionality as well. Okay. All right, we see Michael Pierce is basically in the same lines of conceptually what I just explained, but he did it more succinctly. All right, so we see, hi Greg, what are the best way to read some chords while the project is playing? I mean in the score editor. Is it possible to have the score page side to side? So let's take a look at a project here that has some chords in it. Okay, so let's say I want to take my piano part in this score here. And I could select a MIDI part or an audio part. I'm going to take this piano part, and I could say, we go to the project menu to chord track, and we could say create chords from events. And now it's created the chord chart for me. If I wanted to come here, let's create a MIDI track. So when I'm in the piano, when I go to the score editor, I can now come over here and just say, okay, I'm going to look at it in page mode. And if we go to your scores menu to advanced layout, we could just say show chord track. And then we could have the chord track directly on top of your score editor. Or if you create a blank MIDI part, so let's add a MIDI track here. I can now just double click and we have a blank part. And again, we could come over to my scores menu and show chord track. So you could do it just like that. So let me know if that makes sense. All right, so Sway TV asks, how do I scrub hearing the sound? So when we go to the play tool, we could put this in play. And then if we go down, there's an alternate mode. And this is the same in Cubase and Nuendo, where you could choose to scrub. So if we're kind of zoomed in more, we could, and then we can do our scrubbing there. So go to like your play tool and switch it to the scrub mode. And that'll be output through the control room. All right, Gareth is asking if anyone's had experience with URRT4. I would say that the mic pre's with the Rupert Neve transformers are really good. All right, so with that, we are just about out of time. We will be back on Tuesday starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. We will have our Club Cubase Zoom social meetup starting at 3 p.m., so we'll go for about 2 hours. And with that, we will go ahead and wrap up. I want to thank everyone for spending part of your morning, evening, afternoon learning more about Steinberg products. And we want everyone to please stay safe and healthy over the weekend, and we'll see everyone back on Tuesday. Thank you very much.